Hello. Welcome to the second in our series of briefings we are hosting on workforce development. For those tuning in for the first time, Autos Drive America represents international automakers that have made America their home for the past 60 years. International automakers are American automakers. They are integral to our country's workforce, communities, and economy. Today, they produce nearly half of all new cars, trucks, and SUVs made in America. At the heart of their operations is the American worker. Today, international automakers support over 2.5 million jobs across the United States. These jobs include direct and indirect jobs created by international nameplate automobile dealer franchisees and suppliers. This number, however, does not reflect the additional ripple effect of jobs created by logistics, how we make, move, and deliver products. Our country is at an inflection point when it comes to jobs. There are new trends in the labor market, high demand in various segments for skills, and employers competing for talent. And we are in the midst of radical changes driven by technological advances. This is especially true in the automotive sector, as automobiles become safer, simpler, and more sustainable for people across the globe. Manufacturing is also transformed by technological advances. With all this innovation, it is essential that we prepare the workforce of the future. How do we make automotive careers, both in manufacturing and retail, more appealing to younger generations? How can private-public partnerships help close the skills gap? What state-level workforce development best practices can be applied to federal workforce development programs? We are going to explore all of those questions in our session today. We know there is a lot we can learn from the states who are key partners with us in preparing the workforce of the future. Throughout our discussion, we will learn more about what certain states like Kentucky, South Carolina, Alabama, and Indiana are doing to address the country's workforce needs. I would like to first kick off our discussion with some remarks from Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear.
Hi everyone, I'm Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear, and I am proud to join Autos Drive America today for this important conversation around workforce development. Here in Kentucky, we are seeing our economy surge as we emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic. A major contributor to this resurgence is the auto industry, with automotive companies creating 1,100 new jobs through $177 million in new investments in this year alone. And folks, we're just getting started. As we look to continue this momentum, we will prioritize the training and hiring of a strong, world-class workforce. The two areas go hand in hand. And here in the Commonwealth, we have already seen success through partnerships between the manufacturing and auto industries and our educational institutions. Developed in 2009, after a need for more skilled people to enter the industry, Toyota and Bluegrass Community and Technical College worked together to create a manufacturing plant-driven program. The AMT program is available at local community colleges, and it allows individuals to earn money while attending school so they can graduate debt-free. Flexibility is built into the program, allowing manufacturers to be directly involved with the development to ensure their workforce is trained to meet the needs of today and tomorrow. In 2015, Kentucky FAME was established to support and offer standardization so that programs can share best practices and continuously improve what they offer. Through Kentucky FAME, manufacturers also provide mentors for students so they can help share their experiences and they can ensure success. This program, it's worked, and not just here in Kentucky, but in states across the country. The graduation rate is 16 times higher than the national average, and that's remarkable. The program launches quality, good-paying careers while fueling our workforce and our manufacturing industry. It's a prime example of what we can do when industries like manufacturing and auto partner with student education. Everybody wins, everybody benefits. For me, I want to build a better Kentucky with prosperity reaching every part of the Commonwealth through good jobs and economic success. Education is the key to breaking cycles of poverty and ensuring our future is bright. AMT and Kentucky FAME do both, which is why I'm proud to see this program continue to produce successful outcomes for the Commonwealth and beyond. Thank you to every single organization for helping us thrive in Kentucky through this program. Together, we're making a difference. Together, we're going to succeed.
Thank you, Governor. As you just heard from the governor, there is a lot happening in the state of Kentucky. But let's dive deeper into both state level activity as well as public private partnerships. Let me introduce you to our distinguished panelists. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. I'd like to start by asking each of you to provide a brief introduction. And let's begin with Susie Shannon, President and CEO of the South Carolina Council on Competitiveness. Susie.
Thank you, Jennifer, and many thanks for the invitation to join in today and share our collaborative approach to South Carolina's economic and workforce development efforts. The council was formed just under 20 years ago by a group of forward-thinking political and business leaders and even research university presidents. We are a business-led nonprofit with the mission of advancing the state's long-term competitiveness, sort of an infinity sign as to when our work is actually done and checked off. We are a little bit unique, and one that we're the only statewide competitiveness council across the U.S. You do see there is a U.S. National Competitiveness Council, which is separate and independent, and you do see some pocket and regions of cluster type of competitiveness councils. But we are unique in that we are the only statewide. So we actually have built in a wholly collaborative approach within our DNA. We are made up of industry reps and educators and state officials. So those with the gravitas to get things accomplished. The idea is to create a convening framework to carry out our actionable research like economic impact studies, warehousing studies, education workforce studies, and also to support education and workforce initiatives throughout the state and across a number of industry verticals. But the backbone of what we do every day is to nurture and manage statewide clusters and programs. Rather than being the Noah's Ark and trying to include 2 of each species, which we have tried to do in the past, we manage or support in some meaningful way across most of our key economic sectors, such as aerospace and technology, cybersecurity, and of course, the magic sauce that makes all of our manufacturing success come together, and that's logistics. So inside of our logistics cluster, we have represented all modes that drive our state's success: rail, roads, maritime, air freight. Automobile manufacturing is critical for each leg, such as getting new vehicles assembled at BMW's plant Spartanburg and at Volvo, Mercedes, loaded onto short rail or over-the-road transport. Also included within our logistics network are some of our tech and cyber companies. We take it for granted sometimes, but there's a lot of technology overlaid on top of manufacturing, whether it's smart features built into the car. I'm still trying to figure out half of what my car's buttons actually do. Industry 4.0 or even 5.0 applications used to make the assembly line more efficient and productive, more safe, and honestly, a lot more fun to work on compared to the olden days of a greasy manufacturing floor. So we have a dedicated full-time boots on the ground director shepherding each of our cluster programs, along with an advisory board to help guide our way. We tell our partners we do this work for them, but we cannot do it without them in supporting both what they do and what they're going to need. We have represented OEMs, tier 1s through 4 suppliers, economic developers, air cargo operators, transportation service providers, land use experts, rail carriers, our peer trade associations, and then of course state agency partners like departments of commerce and transportation and our state ports authority, and then of course the technology companies, as you mentioned, Jennifer, that help build out those tech efficiencies and getting the stuff that we make out the door farther, faster and better. So SE Competes is that collaborative roundup of these related companies, and how we like to define clustering is these companies are explicitly working together to fundamentally change their cost structure, their shared marketing, their shared research, their shared vendor relationships as a direct and competitive weapon, and it's a lot of fun too. So thanks.
Thank you, Susie. That is a lot. It certainly sounds like you're very busy, very active. And I look forward to talking more about all of that. Yes, of course. Let me turn next to our next panelist, and that is Steve Gates. I'm very pleased to have Steve with us. He's a dealer principal with the Gates Auto family. So Steve, let me turn it to you to introduce yourself.
Well, thank you. Steve Gates with the Gates Auto family. My grandfather started selling cars in 1915. In fact, on August 28th, we'll celebrate our 106th anniversary. So I'm the third generation following my grandfather and my dad. I have two daughters who work in the business, so we've got the fourth generation covered. I have six grandchildren and another two on the way, so maybe the fifth generation is covered. We represent great brands: Toyota, Nissan, Honda, Hyundai, Kia, Audi, and Lexus. We're a small group, but I was going through some numbers yesterday, and I don't know, they sound pretty good, so I'll read them to you. We had $45 million in sales last year. We sold 15,720 new and used cars. We have 656 team members with a total payroll of $35,155,000, thus an average of $53,951 per associate. That far surpasses the Kentucky average income of $28,178. Like all international nameplate dealers, we're hiring in all departments. Nationally, there are 9,400 international nameplate dealers with a total payroll of $35.5 billion. I hope we're important to the economy of Kentucky, and I know international nameplate dealers are vital to the economy in the United States. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. I think there's no question that you all are, that you yourself and the dealers are vital to this economy and to the country. And congratulations on your upcoming anniversary. And it is so exciting about fourth generation. That's amazing. Our last panelist that I'm pleased to introduce is Brad Newman, who is the president of Shelton State Community College. Brad, if I could turn to you.
Just a little bit about me. This is, God found a spot for me in the education world that surely I wouldn't have found on my own. I was somewhat glad to get out of engineering school and go to work, and now have found myself back in the college environment. It's a lot more comfortable as the president of the college. I have spent a lot of time in the automotive industry. When I graduated with an engineering degree from the University of Alabama, I started out as a manufacturing engineer, and then through several moves and different tier one suppliers to different OEMs around the Southeast, had an opportunity to meet them all, be introduced to several different types of manufacturing, from precision machining to injection molding and just in sequence assembly, things like that. And landed back in Tuscaloosa, Alabama as a plant manager for ZF Chassis Systems, which ZF is the second or third largest tier one automotive supplier in the world. So with that, I had the opportunity not to get back closer to where it all started, but to really get my feet in the mud, for lack of a better term. And with all thoughts of staying local and seeing what I could do here to make a difference. And I've had a lot of opportunity, given that I've stayed here for a while. I left ZF just 5 months ago as a plant manager, general manager for one of the plants here supplying to MBUSI. And I was very engaged and still engaged in workforce development in West Alabama as the chairman of West Alabama Works and the West Alabama Regional Workforce Council, and board member and vice chair for education and workforce development for the Chamber of Commerce of West Alabama. I'm an ex officio board member for Tuscaloosa County Industrial Development Authority, and a German Business Council founding member for the Alabama-Germany Partnership. And so having had the need to utilize workers in the automotive environment and now be in a position where I'm going to have a chance to educate them is unique, and really looking forward to that and sharing whatever I might have learned in that process.
Thank you, Brad. There's no question your experience, I think, is very vital and instrumental in certainly in educating the next workforce. And so let's jump into our discussion. And I'm going to start off. I think Susie, let's start with you with the first question. So I know you mentioned all these clusters, which I think is rather unique, or at least it is to me, and the success that certainly South Carolina is having by creating these cluster groups, which seem to work really well together, and I think have been really impactful to South Carolina's competitiveness. How did you all go about determining that this was the best path forward? Because, like I said, I'm not sure that others do it this way.
Yeah, so, we were formed just under 20 years ago, and we were starting to see a bit of a radical shift in our economy. Of course, plant Spartanburg BMW was located in the state. Michelin's North American Tire headquarters was located in the state. So we had quite a robust automobile manufacturing ecosystem already planted here. But we had also historically been strong in textile manufacturing, apparel manufacturing, and you were starting to see, as you know, in the 90s, a bit of an offshoring and a relocation of some of those plants. So a number of those industry concerns began to retool, right? So how can they retool? They wanted to, it was very easy to turn over those plants and that workforce that had been so critical to the success of that manufacturing, or that textile manufacturing industry, over into more advanced manufacturing as that global economy was beginning to sort of begin to build and be framed within the region. And so, with some of that offshoring, those leaders that I mentioned earlier, academic, political, business, and community, rallied together and said, we need a plan. And so we brought in a guy who had very large ideas about how regional economies can compete, and that was Dr. Michael Porter out of Harvard University Business School. And so it really was about, how do we take the sectors that we do have a foothold in, and begin to nurture them, to help them to grow, help them to cross-pollinate into other industry sector areas, and to help build out that supply chain. And so that's how we came about. So the approach that we take is very much in a collaborative framework. We're working closely with, the workforce director at Commerce and State Department of Ed, closely and critically with our industry partners to figure out what their workforce needs are, because that education and workforce is that evergreen issue that populates across the entire cluster ecosystem, no matter what industry vertical you may be sitting in. So working really closely with companies to sort of figure out that now, next, later with respect to their needs, and how we can be a through line to rally those companies, some of which have exactly the same foundational skill sets, right? Such as aerospace and automotive and a lot of the advanced manufacturing sectors, and then develop programs working with the academic institutions and the policymakers to apply the resources needed to make that workforce capacity development and matchmaking very efficient. And of course, we looked at other regions to see what they're doing, like Kentucky, like Alabama, and elsewhere. And by the way, we have a ZF transmission here in Lawrence County, and very, very proud of their work. And then we also try to showcase companies that are accelerating ahead on innovation to be a model around the state. For instance, we recently hosted the state's first ever Innovation Day at an automotive OEM, and took more than 100 invitees around 6 stations all across the plant to spotlight smart tech. Each of those stations was manned by an associate who proudly showed off how applied innovation on that factory floor made their work smarter, more productive, and safer. And a number of these employees were retrained as that automation came online.
Susie, I think that's great. And I know that the council, I mean, you talked about this a little bit, but I know the council is very focused on workforce development. It's really, I think, one of the key, your key tenets, right, of the council's being. And it really has helped recognize, I think, it's been key to the state's long-term economic health and competitiveness. So can you maybe give us some specific examples, perhaps? Because I think it's always best if we can learn about this through specific examples that have really worked. Regarding the automotive sector in South Carolina that you mentioned, of course, and how what the council has done with maybe some of the automotive manufacturers to really create these education initiatives and workforce needs, and how it's really helped the workers in the state. And if you could provide any examples, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, so this has really been a team SC approach where all hands have been on deck, and looking at a program that actually incubated inside of VAVO. So South Carolina recently established a streamlined certificate program called Manu First, and what that does is it allows prospective employees to jumpstart their manufacturing careers with a 60. I have to look at my cheat sheet to recap everything we have going on. 62 hours, 3 week certificate in lieu of the 1 year of experience typically needed. And so right now, the last I checked, more than 10% of VAVO SC's workforce are Manu First graduates. So now there's more than 1,000 individuals already enrolled and over 100 companies across South Carolina accepting that certificate. And in fact, to brag a little bit, the program was recognized by the 2019 World Manufacturing Forum in its top 10 best practices. So what an exemplar of reducing the skills gap and enlarging that manufacturing talent pool, especially through engaging underrepresented populations. Another fairly new, and a really promising program is something that is called SC Wins, WINS, even though it stands for Workforce Industry Needs Scholarship. And so looking in those industries where local areas have deemed a workforce shortage, and of course manufacturing, always looking to churn quality and quantity, monies are available to cover any tuition and mandatory fees, and those eligible include dual enrolled high school students, high school completers. So this is really a program that allows our residents to pursue a certificate, a diploma, or degree within a critical workforce area like manufacturing at no to minimal cost. And then we also help to manage the state's investment in an online platform developed by Tallo, which is now has a national footprint that match makes students and companies for jobs, and will also match make students and colleges with opportunities for scholarships, internships, and apprenticeships. And that's no cost to the school. It's no cost to the kids. So it's really, beginning to think more about how we can collate all of this together. We have to work together to do things, and we have to have somebody around who wants what we have to make, have to sell, and have to offer. And our motto is, when you work together, you win.
I think that's absolutely correct. And those are fantastic examples of really successful programs. So thank you for sharing those with us. Steve, I'd like to turn to you next. I think you come at this from a different perspective. I think it's so critical because I think for anyone who has taken their vehicle to their dealer to get service, we know how skilled these service technicians need to be to not only diagnose the problem, but also then to fix it as quickly as possible, of course. Can you explain to us the process for these technicians to become so highly skilled? And, more often than not, I suspect these technicians start off with no background at all in repairing vehicles. So if you can just give us some background on how they go through the training, how you even locate some of these individuals to be these service technicians.
Well, it's tough to find people. I think I need Susie's help. We, for service, as long as somebody comes in and they seem to have an aptitude for all things mechanical, we can train them to be technicians. They start as trainees changing oil and rotating tires, all the while being supervised by experienced technicians. And after they've done that for 6 to 9 months, assuming everything's been done satisfactorily, they have the opportunity to move up to do some other repair work, and that's really where the real training begins. Most of our training is the training and sustainment really is done by the manufacturers. All of the manufacturers have centrally located training centers. So we send these techs periodically throughout their careers to these centers. Sometimes classes are 2 days, sometimes they're a full week. And again, as I said, they're ongoing throughout their careers. they're free to the tech, not free to us, and we pay the technician for the time that they've lost while they're in training. The manufacturers also send their experts to dealerships periodically, particularly when we have an unusual or particularly difficult problem to diagnose and repair. But again, it's important to note that techs are always paid during these periods of time. There's no downtime. So now we also have our older master techs work as mentors for our younger techs, and they also are paid for this. So that's kind of our process.
Well, that sounds like a process that definitely works for the benefit of everybody. You mentioned just a moment ago that you are having trouble, I guess, finding workers, right? And I'm just curious, what have you found are some of the best ways to find some of the best employees that you have? I'm sure there's maybe some unusual things that you have to do to find them.
Well, that's true. I mean, we look everywhere. And my best example, and I use this all the time, I probably tell this story 3 times a week. When I first started 35 years ago, the first day I was here, I went to a Pizza Hut. And my server was a young woman, Jennifer, who just provided extraordinary service. I mean, she was unbelievable. So good, in fact, that I asked her if she wanted to come to work at Toyota South. She turned me down. A couple of years later, she walked into Toyota South, and she was carrying boxes of pizza. Turns out the Pizza Hut has extra pizzas at the end of the day. Normally they'd throw away. Well, she had this idea that she could take these pizzas out into the community and sell them, and she got to keep 50% of the profit. So we bought pizzas. I offered her a job again. She said no. But finally, after a few years, she, I think reluctantly at the time, relented and took a job with us. Well, now she's one of our most highly paid managers. She's a service manager. She's extraordinary. And it's all because of Pizza Hut. So we look for places. We look at restaurants, clothing stores, friends of friends. We have several people that are ex-military, and so they've been great in helping us recruit men and women just out of the military. So anything we can do. Of course, we use Indeed and ZipRecruiter and some traditional companies like that. But our best, the associates, come from more atypical venues.
That is a great story, and I can see why you tell it often. And definitely your persistence paid off, it sounds like. That's wonderful. Brad, I'd like to turn to you next. Alabama, I certainly have heard plenty of times that Alabama is considered a model state regarding workforce development efforts. When we spoke just the other day, you shared that Alabama takes a value stream approach to its workforce development efforts. I'd like to, if you could explain to us what this value stream approach means and how it works.
From a West Alabama work standpoint is where we're developing that additional layer of workforce development. Alabama Works was kicked off and it gave us the initiative and backing that we needed and focus that we needed as hiring authorities, and in connection with our stakeholders to come together and figure out a way to improve workforce development by region. West Alabama Works, which I am a part of because of my location, really has taken that to the next level. And You mentioned value stream approach, and really what it is we're just looking at it from a collective standpoint. And where in the past there might have been opportunities for an individual organization or group of organizations to be, set aside or have their own agendas, that really is no longer the case. We have a very well plugged in and engaged OEM in Mercedes-Benz US International, and through the automotive cluster, and I heard that mentioned earlier, that term, they lead that. And from that, all the suppliers attend, and I'll just use them as the example. We have other clusters, of course, but what we took from there was the opportunity to say, okay, we have a customer who's really paying attention and who is engaged. I was a plant manager at the time, needing employees, and had the opportunity to work with the community colleges, all of the traditional offerings for finding employees that you would be used to in the past, using temp agencies, posting for jobs, that type of thing. Well, when the unemployment rate dropped so low, and with a relatively high non-participation rate, it put us in a position where we really couldn't afford to miss anything. And to do that, we had to ensure there wasn't any opportunity for miscommunication. So we really do take a cross-functional and supply, for lack of a better term, supplier to the customer approach to the workforce development. And what I mean by that is, and we'll use automotive, for example, there is a clear view from the hiring authorities, which is MBUSI or a tier 1 or tier N supplier. And the goal is over time to have that value stream so clear that pre-K student and that ultimate hiring authority, there's no block in vision from one to the other. So that we're perfectly connected in all things workforce development from a K-12 perspective, city and county, however the school systems are set up, post-secondary, and then of course with the customer, and in this case would be the automotive industry. So we partner with them from a community college standpoint. We understand specifically what their needs are. We're in agreement with whatever plan it is that works best to assist them in their objectives. And that really means that we put ourselves in a position where we will subordinate our personal and, let's say, school objectives to that of the value stream. I will take resources and put them in the K-12 arena if needed, if that's where the constraint is. So if we weren't all on the same page and there wasn't that cross-pollination, all in the same room, attempting to solve the problems at the same time, we wouldn't be able to gain that improvement. And really for us, and there's a lot of discussion about programs and who should be involved and how they should be involved. And, from a hiring authority's perspective, which I was 6 months ago in the automotive industry, we needed entry-level workers that were new faces. They're basically, with unemployment as low as it is, we saw a turnover of, quote, the same faces, the same pool of temporary workers that would rotate from one plant to the next. So we've been working in West Alabama for some time to produce new faces, and that is really getting into the school system, the junior high and high schools with Worlds of Works, where we'll have on this campus and have now for 5 years in a row, 4,800, 5,000 eighth grade students who will come through and see all the worlds of work that are available in West Alabama. And it's a big deal. We'll do varsity, wild varsity, where seniors come in and bring their parents and they get one-on-one or two-on-one opportunities, three-on-one opportunities, whatever the case might be, with hiring authorities, get a chance to discuss what potential opportunities exist and opportunities to continue their education if needed. And really is just, and beyond that, being very creative with what else that we have to do to reach population that may not be reached before. And the way to do that is to continue to cast the net larger. From a community college standpoint, I'm not at all interested in what's best for this college. And I know that sounds crazy. What I'm most concerned about is what's best for that little face out there, that if we do what I know we're capable of doing, we'll be able to reach them. Otherwise, we won't. And what that means is whether they land here or not, we're going to make sure that as long as they're in that value stream, they're going to find a spot that fits them where they can land and be comfortable. It might be before they get here, post high school. It might be coming through our program here. It might be going to work, then coming back here and letting the company pay for it. But we're going to make sure that we take away all the excuses for that human and really make it a streamlined process. And we're doing that right now collectively, and it's just working very well to our advantage.
I was gonna say that sounds really excellent, and I've heard that before about trying to start exposing, I guess, students at a young age to manufacturing, and but starting in pre-K or kindergarten, that certainly sounds very young, but I think that's something smart to do, right? Starting early to expose them to other opportunities, other things that are out there. And I know that certainly while you may start really young with them, I know certainly high school, right, is probably the critical time period in a student's life, as far as especially when they've got their parents and they've got their guidance counselors.
Sure.
Really kind of getting them to start thinking about what is their next step and what's their career going to look like, and what about a 4-year college and stuff like that. And so I know that is a very critical time, certainly for students and for showcasing, I think, these different opportunities. And I know that the Shelton State Community College has a lot of different opportunities for high school students. Can you elaborate on a few of those for us?
We first want to make sure that they have opportunities that are in alignment with the things that, like I said, we're going to cast a bigger net. You're going to see Shelton State employees, or you will see them in high schools. You'll see them in these companies who are looking for high school students, really working there to get them put in place, whether it's a particular certificate or training program by supplier that will allow us to teach these students and allow them to come straight out of high school to those employers. In modern manufacturing, for example, you've come into high school, you can see that I can go into a modern manufacturing program. I can come out of that program, go straight to work for an OEM, or I can say, hey, I liked it. I want to continue my formal education, and I'll go on to do a mechatronics program, CNC machining, you name it. We have all of those technical programs that would support the local automotive company and many more, construction, health services, and so on. So those exist. The main thing for us is that we don't make it about us, and we keep it very we're very flexible within the boundaries that the school system and the rules of the school system and accreditation allows us, and be sure that those young folks get that opportunity.
That's excellent. Thank you so much for that. I wanted to turn a little bit and talk about apprenticeship programs. And Susie, I think I'll start with you. Prior to the pandemic, and certainly what we are seeing today through this recovery, is the high demand for workers, and I think we all are seeing that. And in manufacturing, I know that certainly apprenticeships are important for both the student, who gets a return on their investment, and the employer, who gets to know that they're getting a well-trained employee when they are hired full-time. And international automakers, as you know, are leading the way, certainly on apprenticeships, and find them to be extremely valuable. South Carolina's Apprenticeship Carolina has been recognized by the Department of Labor as a national model. Can you describe the program to us and why it's such an invaluable tool for both the student and the student worker and the employer? And I believe there's also a youth apprenticeship program. If you could talk a little about both of those.
Yeah, the youth apprenticeship, the pre-apprenticeship program is probably the newest flavor attached to the apprenticeship program. And it's sort of interesting because I was personally involved in the development of Apprenticeship Carolina. Oh goodness, 2006, 2007 kind of time frame. It was, just when we had the last recessionary crash, and we were seeing a bit of a depressed effect across the economy. And so at the time, what the legislature had the foresight to do was, one, to enact an employer tax credit per registered apprentice that would be offered to employers who brought on apprentices. And they created within our South Carolina Technical State overlay state technical college system a dedicated apprenticeship Carolina program and funded it, which then allowed the system to hire dedicated field representatives to go out and do a few things. One, to dispel the myths that, you know, all of these registered apprenticeships, you know, were required to be somehow under a collective bargaining. And two, that the paperwork involved in getting a compliant registered apprentice on board was not so unduly burdensome that it could not be suitably managed. And so that went a long way to helping lift up that program. I think back then when we first started, we were right around 800 apprentices. And if you looked at our, you know, neighbor to the north, North Carolina, neighbor slightly to the southwest in Georgia, they were about 10, 12, 14,000 compared to our 800. So amazingly, and we were actually featured within the New York Times in a very positive light on this, is they've now been able to produce, I think now more than 30,000 apprentices across all different trades and occupations, or as we like to say, careers, right? So it's not just the typical trade occupations that you would historically see employing apprentices, but technology. We're actually working with Apprenticeship Carolina right now in how do we deploy more apprentice employees attached to technology firms, because that one is, you know, a little bit unique and a little bit different in the life sciences and medical fields, for instance, but certainly manufacturing. And that, you know, coupled with the Manu First program and the WINS program has really seen a lot of success. And interestingly enough, we did a survey late last year of several hundred employers across the state, and every type of flavor you can imagine: urban, rural, ex-urban, manufacturing, hospitality, and the like. And what we found is that those employers valued apprenticeships, valued internships, right? Valued real world experience, sometimes even more than the degrees, right? So it's really skills over degrees. And one of the things that we also found was, in addition to tackling some of those technical skills training needed, a harder but a critical complement is those life or soft skills, like being a team player, being courteous, showing up for work on time. Years ago, we helped to codify the State Department of Education, and the General Assembly codified a profile of what South Carolina's graduates need to look like based upon what employers shared are key. And, you know, characteristics like integrity and good attitude often rank knowledge in a particular some employers. Funnily, you know, as far as attitude, no one really knows what is supposed to be in the attitude box. They just know when you have a bad one. And so I think apprenticeships and internship opportunities really give the employer an opportunity to see how that employee will, you know, will perform in a given, you know. And I did want to kind of throw in another exemplar that I failed to mention, and of course this was amplified 10 times, and that is, and it's a program still under development, but it's called the SC Workforce Journeys Initiative. And that's where you take, you know, 3 people at an inflection point in their careers to go on the road, literally on the road in an RV, and using the voice of business, get our young people, particularly those negatively affected by COVID, charged up about what careers in high need sectors like manufacturing, what they could do, right? What they could achieve, how they could be successful.
Susie, thank you for that. There's no question. I think it's the education, right, and the hands-on experience. I think that certainly makes all the difference. You know, and I think that also gets to another point, something that I wanted to talk briefly about, and perhaps turn to both Steve and Brad about this, is the misconceptions I think, that are out there about the automotive, sector and careers in the automotive sector. So, Steve, maybe we'll start with you. What are some of the misconceptions around automotive retail careers?
Well, I guess if you've seen a Vroom commercial or a Carvana commercial, we look like terrible places to go to work. But those are mythical. I think in sales, the barriers are people think that there'll be terrible hours, low pay and commission based, and have to learn how to exert a lot of high pressure to sell cars. Fact of the matter is, just average pay for salespeople is about $50,000. Pay is not commission. In fact, it's based on retention. We hope for generations, customer satisfaction, and completion of manufacturer and dealer-led training. We offer flexible schedules. These are really great places to work. For service, for techs, I think the misconception is that the service department is dirty, it's greasy, the work's tough on your body, and maybe the future's murky. Well, the reality is, we work in climate-controlled facilities. We have equipment that's designed to be easier on the body to reduce physical stress. I think it's often believed that cars can be repaired remotely by wire, or you can plug it into a computer, that you don't need a tech. Well, those are also myths. We need techs. We're going to need techs for years and years and years, forever. So I think those are the barriers.
Thank you. And I think there's no question about that. I think you're absolutely right on all of those points. Brad, let me turn to you. Certainly, given your experience and your career in the automotive sector, we certainly know that it's very different today than it was, say, 30 years ago. So what do you think needs to happen to change, I guess, the current generation, future generations, and understanding that pursuing a career path in the automotive sector, is a good thing to do?
Yeah, where we've made inroads is awareness, and it started out with parents and guardians. Really, we had to fight very strategically this concept that has been drubbed into all of us for generations and decades, that it's a 4-year degree or bust, and that has really created a significant false hurdle for the folks who just don't see themselves as 4-year, 4-year capable, or just want a 4-year college degree. And to overcome that, we had to get to the parents and guardians, had to help them understand that, little Susie and little Johnny, there are options outside of that. Once we were able to get them to a point where they would at least listen to us, we had to help the educators understand what those opportunities are, because it's not just that the parents didn't get it. It's not just that the educators didn't get it or see it, that we're still a knuckle dragging manufacturing operation from way back. It is also that there were measures and incentives that went against it. You go to a graduation in high school, and the bragging rights are how many dollars worth of scholarships were given to 4-year institutions. Not a whole lot of talk about these wonderful opportunities that the children were getting coming out of high school, moving into a 2-year college, like my son and daughter-in-law did, and both doing extremely well. And so there was a lot to overcome. We were very strategic and focused on those items. And some examples are the Educators Workforce Academy. Through West Alabama Works, we partnered with the city and county schools for the school systems and said, all right, We want to offer a certificate program for your educators, and we want to start with the very top end of the organizations, the superintendents, principals, and of course, those folks are going to be meeting with the students and telling them what their future what they might want to be. And they signed up for it. They would tour the facilities. We at ZF, we were one of the plants that they would tour. And when we would carry them through the operations, we would allow some of our folks to walk them through and explain it to them, explain the wage and benefits. They could see the high tech. And, like it was stated just a minute ago, it's heated and air conditioned. It's the opposite of what they expected. And I had lots of educators say, Brad, are you hiring? And this is great. So they had no idea. So for those counselors to be able to go back and now have a whole different perspective on what is available for that individual, that they look at and they say, man, this child has it. They have what is needed to be successful in whatever it is. And it's just outside the 4-year window. We were able to get them a front row seat at what it looks like. And really the kicker on that is it's a high wage, high demand. They're high wage, high demand jobs. And that's really what we're focused on in the community college system. And now we're finally really seeing that these technical programs are, technical is cool now. You're seeing these young folks driving new cars and, enjoying life, and mom and dad are appreciating that they're out on their, some of them out on their own. And that's really what it took for us. We even from that said, from this Educators Workforce Academy, there was a group of people that we were missing, and it was the athletes. We couldn't get to them because they're at practice and they didn't get, weren't around these other educators that much. And so they didn't get a chance to spend much time with them. So because of that, what's come from that is we're looking at right now, partnering with West Alabama Works from a community college standpoint and kicking off a coaches academy. Send coaches specifically through the program so that they can see it. And as they're working with their athletes, they can say, man, listen, there's an opportunity for you here that I had no clue about, and that you don't have to move on to a 4-year college to be successful. And if you don't get that extension and full ride to the University of Alabama from here, hey, it's okay. There are wonderful opportunities right here that you can stay engaged in. And so that really is how we're doing it here locally, and just really staying everybody focused at the table at the same time on the items that are, breaking through those constraints and bottlenecks for people to get into these programs.
And those are some great examples, and no question, it seems to be working. I liked what you said, though. I wrote it down. Technology is cool. I think that is definitely something that I think you've shown, and you can highlight that to these students and show them that it actually is cool. We are running out of time, unfortunately. I think there's a lot more that I would love to ask you all if we had the time. We do have one other piece that I wanted to throw into the mix here. And, we've talked a lot, or Susie certainly talked a lot with a lot of background on South Carolina's activities, which, as we highlighted at the very beginning, are very many, and we couldn't even scratch the surface on a lot of them. But, South Carolina, no question, is leading the way in high-tech manufacturing and innovation. Which is why I am pleased to share with you some remarks from South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster, who has been a great champion of the international automotive industry.
Hello, I'm Henry McMaster, and I'm happy to join you in celebrating the tremendous and transformative impact that international automakers have made in the United States, especially in South Carolina. South Carolina is the #1 automobile and tire exporter in the United States. Auto-related companies and suppliers have invested more than $12.5 billion and employ over 72,000 people here. We are proud that BMW, Mercedes-Benz, and Volvo, among others, have made a home here in the Palmetto State. Thanks to these auto companies and their suppliers, South Carolina has become a high-tech manufacturing powerhouse. We love these companies, and it shows. We will continue to invest in our people as we build the workforce of the future. So thank you, Autos Drive America, for hosting this important discussion.
Thank you, Governor. And thank you to everyone for joining us today. And of course, a special thank you to our panelists. In closing, I hope you have the same takeaways that I do. While there is a lot of innovation happening, that does not mean that jobs are going away. New jobs with new skill sets are being created and are needed. Taking a value stream and interconnected approach to workforce development programs like Alabama Works and Transform South Carolina, involving governmental, educational, and private sector components, will provide greater success to train, prepare, and match job seekers with employers. And finally, as Congress considers updating and expanding workforce training programs, flexibility is key to successful workforce development programs. We should all understand that there is not one size fits all, and often skills can outweigh degrees. As always, please check out our website at autosdriveamerica.org to learn more about the activities and contributions international automakers are making in their communities across the country. Thank you for joining us today.